Let me hit you with the truth that most people are too scared to say out loud. People don't hate you because of what you did wrong. They start hating you because you finally started doing something right. You leveled up, and they stayed the same. You healed, and they're still broken. You became harder to manipulate. You stopped answering every call, stopped explaining yourself, stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. And the moment you did that, you became a threat. See, people don't want you to grow. They want you to stay stuck in the version of you that was easy to control. They miss the version of you that apologized for everything. The version that said yes when your soul was screaming a no. And the second you stopped performing for their approval, the second you started walking like you knew who were, what they called it arrogance. People don't hate you because you've done something wrong. They hate you because you've grown beyond their control. This is the truth no one tells you. The moment you decide to take your life back, to stop living for other people's comfort and expectations, you automatically become a mirror. A mirror that forces people to see their own stagnation, their own lack of growth, their own unwillingness to change. When you start evolving, the people who are committed to staying the same get uncomfortable, and that discomfort turns into resentment. They don't resent you because you're bad. They resent you because you're no longer predictable, no longer easy to manipulate, no longer desperate for their validation. The love they once gave you wasn't love. It was control disguised as affection. And when you took your power back, what their family wants, you destroyed the entire illusion they built around who you were supposed to be. You see, people like you best when you're beneath them, when your insecurities made them feel secure, when your silence made their voice louder, when your sacrifices made their life easier. But the second you stop bending, the second you start saying no without explanation, the second you refuse to carry their emotional baggage, suddenly you're different. Suddenly you've changed. And they don't like it because the version of you they loved wasn't real. It was just convenient. They weren't loving you. They were loving what you did for them. And now that you've stepped out of that role, they feel exposed, threatened, out of control. And what do people do when they feel powerless? They attack. They gossip. They pull away. They try to paint you as the villain in a story that's actually about their own inability to grow. It's not your confidence they hate. It's the fact that they no longer have control over how you see yourself. It's not your happiness they're angry about. It's that your joy no longer requires their approval. You're no longer begging, no longer chasing, no longer showing up with your hands open asking for crumbs of validation. And that shift, that radical shift, is what makes people turn, because you're not weak anymore. You're not emotionally dependent anymore. You're not accessible in the same way. And people don't miss the real you. They miss the version of you that was easy to manipulate. That's the version they could dominate, mold, guilt trip, and emotionally leash. But once you reclaim your self-worth, once you realize you're not here to be liked, needed, or understood by everyone, you take away their power to define you. And that is what truly scares them. They want you stuck. They want you doubting yourself. They want you overthinking every move, obsessing over their opinions, apologizing for your confidence. Because the longer you stay insecure, the longer they feel superior. But the moment you start healing, the moment you start walking like you know who you are, the mask comes off. You become intimidating. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're clear. You know what you want. You know what you won't tolerate. You don't earn drama. You don't explain your boundaries. You don't fold under pressure. And people who can't handle that kind of strength, who were only close to you when they could feed off your confusion, start to panic. They start hating you not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them hurt you. You stopped tolerating passive-aggressive comments. You stopped responding to manipulation. You stopped laughing at disrespect. And your silence, your calm, your ability to detach, that makes them furious. Because deep down, they know the game is over. The role you used to play is dead, and there's no going back. They know you've seen the truth now, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You can't unlearn the lesson. You can't go back to pretending you're not enough just to make other people feel better about staying small. So they choose hate. They choose distance. They choose bitterness because it's easier for them to hate your strength than face their weakness. It's easier to label you as arrogant than admit they're still insecure. It's easier to blame you for the distance than admit they created it with their own behavior. And you've got to let them do it. Let them misunderstand you. Let them judge you. Let them gossip. Because the price of becoming who you really are is being hated by the people who only loved your disguise. And that's a price worth paying. You were never meant to be liked by everyone. You were never meant to live your life trying to keep fragile egos comfortable. You were meant to evolve, to rise, to shed skin, to break generational patterns, to stop cycles of emotional slavery. And that kind of transformation will offend people who haven't done the work. It will offend people who still depend on control to feel valuable. You're not responsible for their discomfort. You're not responsible for their reaction to your healing. You're only responsible for staying true to the version of you that doesn't flinch every time someone gets upset that they can't manipulate you anymore. Let them call you selfish. Let them say you've changed. Let them say you're cold. Because every word they throw at you is just proof that they're losing their grip. You're no longer controlled by guilt. You're no longer scared of rejection. You're no longer playing small to keep others happy. You are finally free. Free to choose yourself. Free to live by your truth. Free to walk away from anyone who demands you shrink. And not everyone will celebrate that. Not everyone will clap for your clarity. Some will turn to hate because it's all they have left. But let them. That hate, that's confirmation. Confirmation that you're no longer under their spell. That you've broken the chains. That you've finally become someone they can no longer control. Their sudden hatred is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reaction to your power. When you start standing tall in who you are, people who once had the upper hand begin to crumble. Not because you attacked them, not because you wronged them, but because you no longer shrink to fit their limited vision of you. The hate you feel now, the gossip behind your back, the silent unfollows, but the fake smiles. They're all signals that your transformation has broken the mold they built for you. You were never meant to stay where they placed you. The pedestal, the label, the role. They created it to keep you manageable. But when you stopped playing along, when you stopped being predictable, when you finally stepped into your strength and refused to apologize for it, they felt that shift. And instead of growing with you, they chose to resent you. You didn't become the villain. They just can't stand the fact that you don't need them anymore. That you're no longer begging to be understood. That you're not fighting for a seat at a table where your voice was never valued. And the reason it hurts them so badly isn't because you've changed. It's because you've changed without their permission. They liked you better when you were uncertain. When you doubted yourself, when you explained every move, when your voice trembled and your confidence needed approval. Now you walk in silence. Now you glow without their praise. Now you make decisions they don't get to control. And that triggers the deepest fear in people who depend on your weakness to feel powerful. It's not your happiness that bothers them. It's the fact that they can't take credit for it. It's the fact that your joy isn't coming from their validation, their presence, or their approval. You've become emotionally self-sufficient, and that is dangerous to people who once fed off your dependency. They no longer know how to influence you, how to sway you, how to manipulate you. So they throw shade, they spread rumors. They act distant, not because they're right about you, but because they've lost access to the version of you that tolerated everything quietly. They can't reach you through the same games anymore. The guilt trips don't work. The backhanded compliments fall flat. The silence you used to be afraid of, you now embrace it like armor. And that scares them. They hate you because you've made peace with walking alone. Because you've stopped asking for permission to exist. because you no longer explain why you're no longer available for emotional labor that goes unpaid and unreciprocated. You stopped performing. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped begging. You stopped showing up for people who never once clapped for you. And that level of peace, that level of quiet certainty, feels like arrogance to people who are still stuck in their own chaos. You're not being hated because you did anything wrong. You're being hated because you stopped making yourself smaller for people who refuse to grow. They don't see your healing as progress. They see it as betrayal. They don't see your boundaries as healthy. They see them as rejection. They don't see your independence as strength. They see it as abandonment. Because in their world, your identity was supposed to be an extension of their comfort zone. And now that you've shattered that illusion, now that you've rewritten the narrative and become someone who no longer needs external approval to breathe, they can't handle it. So they label you difficult, selfish, fake, changed, cold. But none of that is real. What's real is that you've evolved. And evolution always offends those who remain stagnant. They hate because you took your power back. And power, when reclaimed, always exposes who never wanted you to have it in the first place. The moment you started walking like you knew your worth, the moment you stopped settling, the moment you stopped explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you, you became the villain in their story, not because you are, but because your strength revealed their weakness, your clarity revealed their confusion, your calm revealed their chaos. And instead of growing with you, they turned on you, because for some people, growth feels like betrayal when they never planned to change themselves. You didn't lose them. They lost the version of you they could control. And the hate, it's not personal. It's projection. It's their own internal being reflected back at them through your peace, your power, your refusal to play the game anymore. They thought you'd come back crawling. They thought you'd keep explaining, keep giving, keep bleeding to prove you're worthy. But you didn't. And that silence, that distance, that calm, unapologetic energy, it drives them crazy. Because it reminds them that you never need them to begin with. They just convinced you that you did. Now that you see the truth, you've become dangerous. Not because you're doing harm, but because you no longer allow harm to be done to you. That is why they hate you now. Not because you failed, but because you stopped failing on purpose to make others feel comfortable. Not because you hurt them, but because you finally stopped letting them hurt you. Not because you changed into someone worse, but because you transformed into someone they can't control, predict, manipulate, or diminish anymore. You've become